Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Carol Sanford. She is just an amazing woman that has had such a plethora of activity in her life and contributions to this world in very positive ways. She's an executive producer at the Regenerative Business Summit. She's a 5 times TEDx speaker. She's got a best-selling Amazon author. She's a senior fellow of the Social Innovation at Babson College, and she's written 5 books. These are very interesting titles too. The Regenerative Life, Transform Any Organization, Our Society, and Your Destiny. The Regenerative Business, Redesign Work, Cultivate Human Potential, Achieve Extraordinary Outcomes. Indirect Work, No More Feedback, and The Responsible Business. Carol, so glad to have you here.
You missed one. You missed
I did.
2. Yeah, No More Feedback, but also The Responsible Entrepreneur.
Thank you very much. So that's
Right.
6. All right.
I'm working on number 7. I hope to get complete before I die, called No More Gold Stars. It is about how behaviorism actually undermines almost every problem we're working on, from climate change to racism to animal inequities, all kinds of inequities.
Oh, I
So,
look forward to getting further into that.
yeah.
And before we
I'm
do,
almost done. Anyway, thank you for that introduction.
oh, you're welcome. And I understand that it takes a lot to write a book. I've got a few myself. And one took me a decade. And I wrote 3 other books in the process of it with ancillary ideas that popped up that didn't fit. So in this quest that you've had and at your point in life, you're able to really look back and kind of go into how you got where you're at and the various points along the journey that then you were able to connect the dots as you grew older. Now, when you were younger, how did you first get in touch with this inner awareness or simple awareness, if you will, that there was a connection that you had to life that was a bit more than what you were being told?
Oh, it was easy. I had a grandfather who was Mohawk. So the fact, and grandmother, they were each part Mohawk. And my grandfather particularly took me for rides and walks and with him in his way of engaging the world. And he owned pigs and all sorts of critters and a little farm. He also was an advisor to the, what do they call them, the Farm Bureau, to other farmers. And so my grandfather always told me there's no such thing as inner and outer unless you can connect with a very large whole of which you're embedded in. And so mostly what he did is got me to learn to see the essence of the beings around me, like what's the essence of pigness, he would say. And then you walk to the river and the pigs, most people don't know this, but they're used to following in groups. And so humans get accepted as a part of the group and they follow them to the river. We would sit down, have conversations, and then my grandfather would take on some kind of teaching. The book, the one I had you say because you forgot, The Responsible Entrepreneur, is a lot about the teachings with my grandfather. And we called it The Responsible Entrepreneur because it was based on 4 archetypes in the native people, the indigenous people's world, not Carl Jung. I mean, his aren't bad, but it was about how you regenerate a community. And the Mohawk got splintered with, excuse me, I get a little bit breathless once in a while, got splintered through slavery with the Scottish and other tribes capturing and taking them south. And so we ended up part of the southern contingent in my ancestry to got to Oklahoma. So regenerating was really important because a tribe had been splintered, and he taught me about how you regenerate something, and it was never about you. He said that there's arrogance and hubris in white men and women, but because we think it's all about us doing something, it's about coming in what he called a 3-level system. I am embedded in and have work to do, but there are communities which have work to do, and there's a grander work on the planet, which is about consciousness and the role of humans, but it's not individual consciousness. He said, he said, you study Socrates, and he was right. When I was in graduate school, I was totally fascinated with Socrates, but I was reading him when I was very little. And he said, he was always telling you, humility is the most important thing. And so that's, I think, a quick and dirty view of my very young years. And
that's fascinating. And it's so rich. What I know from my studies, and I just grew up in a village in Indiana, and yet that I had this quest of knowing more, as you know, and that philosophy, that trinitized philosophy, if you will, of self, others, and the world, where we are part of the whole and we think ourselves separate from it. And what's so, I think, devastating is early on when we misunderstood, especially in the Christian world, the idea of being given dominance over the earth. Well, that actually meant stewardship, in my opinion, and we missed the boat. And we thought, okay, we have dominance, we can do whatever we please, and we're not going to get any consequences from that. And now look what we've done.
So let me tell you what my grandfather said about that, because my grandmother was a Christian of great importance in her community. And he said, we use the word stewardship as another way to say we're in charge. Even when we're the do-good people, what's really true is those 3 rings are not 3 entities. They're 3 natures of work that need to be done. So the work first, I have to do work on me. And that's the most important work for me to do when I'm young. Secondly, I do work with others, but it's on the 3rd ring, which is not the world. That's too abstract. He was so concrete. He was always saying, don't use all these things the Western teachers give you because they're abstractions. You personally are very concrete and have work to do. Secondly, there are certain people you will join with, which you have to develop yourself. It's not go do something. Your work is to develop you. And what you're developing you on is the 3rd line, which is consciousness. And how do you pick in your life to notice what the role of consciousness is? And he said, we banalize that all the time. We talk about meditation and things where somehow we become conscious. He said consciousness is a momentary, ephemeral thing. It's gone in the flash of light. And so the work to do on the 3rd line is learn how to regenerate it, bring it back in this moment on this piece of work at this point in time with these events, and not think we can change the world. It happens moment by moment of consciousness. And I treasure his disrupting most of the world's way of talking about it. So I was probably 14 when he shook me and said, don't get full of arrogance and think you're going to change a damn thing. You aren't. All you can manage is every moment waking up, and now you've given the gift, and then do it again. and then do it again. So
That sounds almost very Zen, right? Where the every day is you work on the mastery of self,
yeah,
and being able to acquiesce to the moment and totally experience the now, and then build upon that to make it extended moments.
yeah. He would say that's all abstraction. Everything you just said is abstraction. What you're really doing is in this moment. Don't try and extend it, regenerate it. You can't extend it. You can't hold consciousness.
Right, because we try to explain it and talk about it like I was just doing, right? In those moments, there are no words. Would you say that's true? There's a sense, there's a feeling, there's a presence in that's beyond words.
To me, it's very concrete. So I pick a thought I want to hold in my mind, like what is pigness? And being with a pig, a real concrete, specific pig. The only thing that feeds the universe is me to notice that I'm noticing the pig, to be witnessing. And I have to have something concrete to do that. If I create abstractions about what I'm doing and say I'm feeling things that's showing up, then I'm not conscious, because consciousness is a moment of witnessing either something I want to understand better or something I want to do. And most of the time I can't do it. I lie to myself. I say, I'm going to pay attention to this. I mean, I challenge all your viewers. Decide for 10 minutes, or no, let's take 2 minutes. You're going to think about time and the time you're in right now. And nothing else. Won't let your mind float away. Most of us, including me, can't really do that. I've gotten better over time.
It said we've got 70,000 thoughts that run through our heads in a day. And so those kind of distractions, because we're unable to manage our mind well enough, right? We just let it run. We're not able to experience those kinds of moments of focus where your attention, intention, and interaction are in that experience, that as you were saying, the concrete experience of what you are being in the doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I use some different words, but we're probably working toward the same thing. To me, the divided self is what matters. If I'm talking and I'm watching what I'm saying, I'm not being divided. Or excuse me, let me say it this way. If I'm not able to watch what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, whether or not I'm sticking with what I said I wanted to do, then I'm in an abstraction. I'm not in the moment.
Okay.
I'm not sure that makes sense, but
well, let's look at it a different way, man. Maybe there's this the phrase that's kind of ubiquitous. It's when you're chopping wood and carrying water, chop wood and carry water.
Yeah.
Would that fit in as far as the attention?
To me, that's an abstraction. I don't know.
Okay.
I have to say today, I am working with a client, with a group of people, and what I want to do is I hold an aim for myself about how I want to be, and then I watch me and see how well I'm doing that. Otherwise, it's a conversation of something about an idea or something out there. Consciousness is in a moment, is all it ever is.
It's the energy of the moment when you're present. Now, you mentioned out there, is there in this process where you are?
No, we're doing too much abstraction. I can't, you ask me another abstract question. Ask me about how I do it in my work, or what is in a book, something that brings it to real situation. Then I can respond. I begin to feel like I'm speculating on philosophical ideas.
Okay. I appreciate that, and thank you. I'll see if I can bring it back down and look at the practical. What I was going to ask was that, is there a place in you in that attention and awareness? Is it in you, or is it slightly above and behind you when you're watching yourself?
I have no idea. Yesterday, or last weekend, I ran a workshop, and let me tell you how it's designed, because it's practical, and we did it. I had people write what their beliefs are about the role of humans and what their method was working on that. Now they've got something concrete that they do in their everyday life. And I said, all right, now I'm going to offer you a thought I believe I have. And the intention is not to say you're wrong or right, but to notice how we want to be in a two-term system. So the important thing was them watching themselves and being, I'm leading it, so part of them wants to adopt what I just said, borrow it. And the reason I have them start with their own beliefs is now they have something to hold with mine at the same time. And then I said, what new idea comes out of that that's not in my idea or yours? Now they have to watch what's going on with them, and they report, well, it's horrible. I feel like you're a teacher or some kind, and I should accept you. We all agree I'm not a teacher. I'm not a guru. I'm nothing but another person. And so if they watch all this, they can, with a kind of a third eye, I guess you'd say, be able to observe what's going on in their mind. And it's not coming from outside of them, it's coming from a consciousness they've developed a practice being able to watch. And then I secondly said, all right, now look at your methods. And by the way, my belief was that humans have a core role to play that has to do with every moment bringing consciousness to their activities, their personal ones. And when they can do that, it creates more mental energy for people who can't do that. And that's their job. Their job is not to change anybody else. It's to, in this moment, generate more conscious mental energy than they need to put in the universe. So the second question was, well, look at your methods and how do they line up with your own work, what you just noticed about you, and you could share with others, but the very fact of being able to be conscious of whether your methods are consistent and inconsistent, like being abstract to me is inconsistent with being present in the moment. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Oh, you're answering them wonderfully. And I believe I understand what you're saying is that, and for me, I was looking at the different places that I sense I am in that process that you're talking about, right? Of being conscious, where there's something that's more in the front of my being that's active, and then there's something in the back of my being that's the observer monitoring what I'm doing and giving me feedback about it. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is the assessment of how present you are as you're doing your best to be present in that moment, in the practical activity that you're engaging.
As long as you're not doing that abstractly, but you're looking at a particular thing you set out to do and you're watching what you're doing now, you have something real in front of you.
Right. And somehow I'm sharing a screen that I shouldn't be. There we go. That was weird. Had some gremlins. I didn't touch anything. All of a sudden the screen shifted to a document we've been working on. In that place of awareness and activity, because I totally, I'll say, I perceive that I totally understand what you're saying, and the focus of attention, intention, and interaction that you have that manifests in the concrete work, that you are so dedicated to it that there are no distractions. Not that there aren't any distractions, you don't give those potential distractions any attention at all.
Well, I wish that were true. That's certainly an intention.
Right.
Yeah.
I realize that in that our minds are so powerful
Yeah.
and attentive.
I don't have that
and
powerful mind. I wish I did.
Oh, you sure do. Otherwise, and I'll just offer this: we wouldn't be having a conversation if our mind wasn't that powerful. And I acknowledge that you, as many, have a power within them in that connection to the consciousness that expands,
No, I don't.
others.
I don't. I'm
Well,
able to regenerate it.
can I offer that you might? And
No, that's hubris. To think that I have some special power.
no. That wasn't meant from a hubris place. That was meant, I had a conversation this morning with a guy named Seamus Power over in Ireland, and we were talking about the difference between the ego and the supra ego, as Aurobindo would call it, where the ego is hubris, right? It wants to stand, wave flag, and say, hey, look at me, look at what I'm doing, things like that. Where the super ego is part of that process that you're talking about. There's no ego there. There's just total participation in their whatever perfected form, fit, and function they have in that moment.
Maybe I don't remember Sri Aurobindo having thoughts like that out of the mother, but they do have different levels of consciousness, I know. So then maybe that's what you're talking about. I studied in that world for a decade.
It's the wonderful work that he did, and others that are all looking at, okay, how do we peer into this activity and really become more conscious of it so that we can participate as part of the whole rather than separately.
Yeah.
And I think that was your point, if I'm not mistaken.
Somewhere in there. I just know that for every human being in a body, you can't sustain attention. It's the nature of the body and it's a distraction, but you can work on regenerating your presence as often as you can. And that to me is the pursuit worth going after, not the idea that somehow we get there and stay there and exceed anything anybody's ever done. So
I totally get that. And we can experience that on a daily basis, right? When we go through our daily routines, there are moments where we can experience what you're talking about.
Right.
And there are other moments where we don't.
Right.
And the extension of that is being able to experience more of that conscious awareness in the moment rather than just rote action or routines or habits or something like that that are more unconscious that we do.
Yeah. I don't work directly on consciousness. I work indirectly on the ableness it takes to reactivate those moments. So I teach people frameworks which are developmental in their nature, that when you can see through those, use them as a lens, they increase the capacity and including build neurological
new neural pathways is
right,
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, my neural pathways with ALS now are decaying. So I'm watching that go in reverse, where I used to get send a signal, eat or speak or move your feet, and my body did it. But because they're degenerating in the same way, they don't support my body doing that all the time. But it's crazy. My mind still can get a signal and work. I don't know.
Right.
And it's neurological too. My mind is fine. My body's not so good.
I noticed that with my adoptive father. He had Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And a similar situation where he just gradually became unable to use his body.
Right.
It was horrible. And you could see it in his eyes. He was still present.
Yeah. Well, I'm still teaching. I'm still running my communities. And of course, they're all based on people self-directing their own development. So I give them a few ideas and they make magic out of it. It's good.
It'd be nice when we can discover the science behind it all, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, well, it would give us at least an understanding that, yeah, this isn't all just made up or projections or myth or anything like that. It's an actual experience that can be had, and here's why. And like we were talking about the energy and the feeling that you get. And speaking of your grandfather being Mohawk, one of the things that I learned, it's been a few years ago, and it totally made sense because it's, even though I didn't realize it, it's how I'd been operating throughout my life with the three brains, the gut, the heart, and the head. And the feeling that takes place of how you are in the moment, you can feel what's going on. You don't necessarily have to think a thing about it. There's these vibrations that are present that your body picks up because the neurosensors are there. Although we didn't know that scientifically until just recently. So the vibrations being all there is, where we feel them. We'd feel them in our gut, our intuition. So a solar plexus, seat of the will. And then in a very Taoist way, we bring it up to the heart and figure out whether it's desirable or undesirable. And then take it up to the head where we make the choices to what to do with it. And then put that, kind of put that back into how we then behave as a result.
Yeah, I have a different framework, so I have a little trouble tracking what you're doing.
How do you feel that would be presented in how you understood me to say it, and what that
Well,
put up for
I'm
you?
not sure I understood, but I'm trying. Here's what I was tracking with.
Okay.
In the Sufi and also in our Three Windows work, there are different centers in our being. And the first center is instinct, not intuition. The system I'm in doesn't have a lot of fanfare for intuition because it's often used as a way to say, this is what I'm familiar with. We will notice it's arriving through our automatic choices. But
Right.
instinct moving center, which these are all systems rather than places, like yours was gut, heart, head. Well, to me, those aren't systems, but the instinctive center makes my body work or not work in my case. Moving center is everything that makes the system move. Emotional center is everything that reaches and connects to what's beyond us. An intellectual center, which is again the working of all the minds, including the body mind, which you may be calling gut, I'm not sure. And then there are higher emotional and higher intellectual, which may be it's hard when we have different frameworks.
Oh yeah, and experiences and things like that. And this is
Yeah.
the whole, purpose, in my opinion, of evolving together, is learning how to create communication that bridges these understandings and helps to maybe not unify them, at least be able to share similar perceptions.
You know what the Dalai Lama says? Take instructions from one school. Don't try and do anything that makes them all the same. Take instruction from one school. And similar what my grandfather said. So you cannot argue with, I don't like this part of that philosophy or this part. You would have to be in integrity with one and then take inspiration from others. But if you really want to do the development of yourself, you have to stick with one and adopt, or not necessarily adopt, integrate by working on to discover. So I have one school, and what you're talking from, it's the language of another school, which is fine. But I don't want to cross them over because I believe the foundation of each one is different. My school is from watching things alive and a living system kind of way. And so that's great for me. it's not great for everyone. So it's
Right.
hard to know whether you and I agree, but we each have a school, I think, yeah, that you're taking instruction from.
And is it possible that, the body being an instrument, not knowing how to tune it is a challenge, let alone play in
Right.
concert?
I agree with that.
Okay, so starting from there, in that holistic system, there are many systems. And that is it possible within that system, whether it be the instinctual or intuitive, or however that, the action or the emotional, is it possible to be in oneself, not necessarily need a teacher or teaching in order to ask questions and get answers?
I think you need a teaching process. I'm with Krishnamurti. I'm not in favor of gurus or teachers, but if we don't have a methodology that develops this, we're incomplete. I do believe
Can one develop it without having a teacher, though, just by the insatiable curiosity that one might have
you
to
don't do it that
discover?
way. No, you don't do it that way. You have a system of developing. So I run a school, or a steward, or whatever the right word is, a school. I'm not a teacher. I invite everybody to never accept and never reject anything I offer. But there are methods that are based on self-directed learning, epistemology. And you don't need, if you have a teacher, then they're now outside the system. So self-directed epistemology is about my new book.
Okay, well, that's kind of what I'm talking about in referencing that, where, and I'm just relating my growing up, and I shared a little bit about my early development and the experience that I was having. I didn't have any teachers.
Right.
I just simply asked questions and listened and responded to what became present in me as answers to, and often it occurred as a voice, kind of like the still small voice that we hear about, right? Sometimes it wasn't so still or small, and yet it's always been there when I have the ability to be quiet enough to listen and not try to answer by thinking.
Why not by thinking?
Because then I'm trying to answer the question with the information I already have. And if I had that information already, I wouldn't be asking the question.
Well, that's the wrong work at the intellectual center. So I agree with you. But I do think the reason I ask is people often say, I want to stop thinking. That means you've been,
No.
You know, or it means
it's turning off that that free thinking intellectual side that's always trying to give you answers for what you already know.
So in my school, we have a definition for what the right and wrong working of the intellectual center is. You're talking about the wrong working. And so if we have the right working, then it's available to us for being able to see the working of things, which we can't do without the intellectual center. We have to image things that work. Now, if out of that, we bring forward our mechanical answers, that's the wrong working of intellectual center.
Okay, so maybe that's what I'm referring to, is those mechanical answers.
Well, in my school, you don't have to change.
Well, I want to be able to talk a similar language, and that's kind of, where we can go to by sharing how we are and really expressing that, rather than taking the stance that, as many do, as we're trying to push and pull our understanding towards it. We're not doing that. We're seeking a common place to speak from and with in that, and peeling, or looking at the various ways that we express.
Now, see, what I think you can't do without help, and I don't think a teacher is the answer, is you have to have new frameworks. And I do believe some of those show up without anyone teaching them. But if we had a society which, instead of basing our education system on people gaining knowledge of experts, of others, and instead we had people learn to see how their thinking, emotions, moving and instinctive center work, and only educating them on the mechanism and all this work, it would be more precise. Because what I think happens when we don't have the Dalai Lama's guidance is we mix and match a bunch of things, from some of which are not very discerning, shall we say. And people don't learn how to discern. And see, if we don't have, and why in the world is our education based on teaching others the knowledge instead of the working of our system, so we can better develop it? So that's where I think there's schools of philosophy, schools of religion, they're trying to give people, but unfortunately many of them fall into transferring their knowledge, their dogma, instead of building the capacity of each of us to use the gifts we have, the brain, the body, the mind. We don't know how
yet. And I think that learning, some of it has become present, especially with the recent activity that we've had of obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration that got people to sit and talk to themselves, right? And to be able to query more about how they think and feel, even though there wasn't instructions or necessarily a teacher by it or teacher available, it gave them the opportunity to just be by themselves. And when you're by yourself, who are you going to talk to, right? And so there's that inner dialogue that begins to take place, which, and I think from what you're saying as well, is that which needs to be present, as opposed to the inclusion of extemporaneous data and information and philosophies that we try to bring in as part of that system in ourselves, and yet it doesn't really belong, because we've taken what's outside of us and tried to bring it inside. And as you mentioned earlier, there's no difference between in and outer. It's just that ability to stay focused and attentive, right? If I'm hearing you correctly.
Well, I'm not sure all of what you said, but I would just add one aspect. I think we need alternative frameworks to be able to see what our current frameworks are thinking. And we have to, a society is built in order to make that possible, but we're doing a terrible job by giving people data instead of epistemologies to learn from. And I don't believe most people in a lifetime get to a way to see different frameworks. They work with the same mental models, and even when they're trying to think, they don't know how to get rid of the mental models. They're in their head. So I believe schools need to exist, but there's sacred schools or lineage schools that give people frameworks to make their own discovery.
Kind of like the old the mystery schools of the past.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Okay, the arcane knowledge, and
that's where my work comes from. It comes from indigenous lineage and quantum schools.
okay.
So I don't make up anything. I don't sit and discover it. I am drawing on teachers and processes and the teachings that have kind of borne out the development of humans in a better way.
Kind of think Irvin Laszlo, Dr. Irvin Laszlo, I had a discussion with him not too long ago, and he has always been a proponent of the higher self, and nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. He is very focused on his assertion that we are the higher self. We just haven't become aware of it yet. And
yeah, I don't think individuals are, but I think they're collectives that can be. Otherwise, we're back to self-centeredness.
oh, absolutely. Now, here's where I want to ask you the question about how do so those individuals garnering the awareness, understanding, attention, then as they develop, do they find residence in that larger collective with the groups that they are then attracted to and are attracted by them? Let me see if I can make that a little simpler. As we move from an individual to a community, that individual has to have that individual self-awareness. And then because it has reached a certain place, then it is able to participate in the community and the work that the community is doing, and not until.
So if I understand what you're asking, here's my version of an answer to that.
Okay.
Before I was born, before I got a body, I made choices about how my own development was going to go, including, I believe I chose I was going to die with ALS. Now, why would anybody do that? Because it's the worst way you can die, right? You suffocate. And so I think I made choices for my development to do that. I also made a choice to be a woman, which makes it hard to ever get recognition, ever get a platform, ever to be taken seriously. So I would have to fight. And also I would be barred from ever succeeding enough that I could let my ego get in the way so I could focus on other things. So and there are probably some other decisions I made. I once in a while become aware of them. So all that stuff you just said, it depends on what you're trying to work toward. If you're trying to work toward, and let's say before I was born, I knew some of my work was about building a school and about consciousness. It better be that I am made hard to get credit for everything, or else the school will not develop correctly. I will be fighting for fame and fortune and whatever else. So I believe all those things you just said sounded like they happen after you're born and you work in
Yes.
some way. I
Right.
believe I knew
Well,
all
it's
that.
fulfilling. It's like you were saying, the choices, and I understand that is probably because the consciousness changes form, right?
Yeah.
And it's just from one body to another, and like in the Vedantic philosophy, and you know, that white light that's that they call the, what is it, unity consciousness, that
Yeah.
we bounce back and forth in between that as cosmic consciousness is what the term that I've learned for that. In that cosmic consciousness is condensed into form as one of those points of light that we talked about earlier. And that point of light bounces back and forth between here and the great light, however many lifetimes it takes to actually get the memo, right? And then develop from there. And that those choices that are made before incarnation are based on what you need to do to accomplish to move to your next level, whatever that may be, because that's not something we're necessarily aware of. We're just aware of, okay, these are the things I need to do in this life and be about doing them. And then that naturally affects a larger whole that, depending on our ability to perform, has different short and long-term effects.
Yeah. Our ability to be developed so we can perform.
Right.
And the other thing I realized I believe happens before I'm born is I make a promise to do something significant that's depending on my level of development will have different levels of difficulty, development, trials to face. And so I think that we can, if we have this thought, we can ask all the time, well, what is it that I'm to develop? I'm engaging a conscious dying group with all the people who are my members since I'm dying. And I told them as we do some of the practices, the question is to ask, what is mind left to do in this life? And that's based on what I call a promise beyond ableness before I was born. And it awakens people having kind of change of course life answers. And if you have the thought that you made a lot of promises or commitments or choices before you were born, you're more likely to search for them.
Absolutely. It's that whole, do I have a mission and purpose question? Why am I here?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. It's a mission and purpose, but that's another conversation.
I understand. And yet those were two things that I thought of that seem to be present that at least move toward what you're talking about in that recognition that there is something, and then the ability to
I
fulfill.
think they very much get in your way. I think they're dangerous. I think they're very popular in psychology.
How
Vision is
so?
what? Well, I'm getting so tired I can't think anymore. So
Okay.
let's think about what would help wrap up for your members and give them what
What are
you
some of the things that you have learned that have given you the greatest fulfillment?
Do I even have an answer to that? I've learned they give me the greatest fulfillment.
And let me take that a little further then. What have you learned and can share of that process that you found gave you fulfillment?
Well, I think the
Better?
major thing is, even though I was born incomplete, because I was human, given a body, and didn't know how to develop anything I promised, that if you commit to working on yourself every day in a concrete value-adding process, something you're seeking to be a part of, and you're in a community to do that with, that you have a chance. And so otherwise, it's very hard to be born a human, and you get sidetracked on being successful, meaning famous or wealthy or something, and miss the window of where magnetic center can wake you up and give you a choice to do something meaningful. I'm watching my 23-year-old grandson struggle with this right now, where he is a high-level graduate out of a good university. And so part of him is so pulled to being successful and comfortable. And so every time I'm with him, I take this learning, you called it I have, which is the most exciting thing is to find that which has meaning, and then let it pull you to develop yourself, to grow you, and to find a community of school, a couple S school that can support you having a really meaningful, contributing life. And as I die and provide exercises for my community, there are a lot about that.
Your life has just been so rich, and you have such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom to share that it's probably going to take several lifetimes for you to do so.
It does for all of us.
I would totally agree with that. Now, in that, let's say in the 23-year-old framework, what are the kinds of things that that you could offer to our younger generations? And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these conversations, is to impart this wisdom that we carry, or at least we think we carry, and offer that as something for the long term, so that the younger generations don't or may not have to look for at least the things that we didn't have available, that now we've got this. There's many more of us, and there's of course, there's all kinds of podcasts and videos and
Right.
kinds of things to listen to. So there is that competition for eyeballs and ears, if you will.
Right.
And yet, do you feel that because of the focus and attention of the seeking, that also brings forth those things that are in place to answer those queries?
So I don't think there'll ever be a time when people come in and don't have to struggle with this, because that would violate the role of humans, where our job is to work on having more consciousness at any moment than we need, so it's available in the universe. You need struggle to have that work arrive. But we don't have schools, capital S schools, that build that capacity. So with my grandson, I'm always asking him what he cares about when he watches the news or something. He's very worried about climate change and about inequality and animal misadventure and the way we treat them.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question becomes, what in there pulls you enough that you want to develop yourself to be able to help with that? Now I have the setup. It's concrete and specific. It's got a method, and he's reading books and we're processing things that are from Vietnamese Buddhism, from Gurdjieff, from various other teachers, and we process them relative to how he develops himself to be able to work on one of those three things at some point. So
that's exquisite.
If you got the concrete, you got to pull, and you got something to observe and to generate consciousness and to build will with. And then you got a reason to do the development work, the inner work, the outer work, the greater work. We had a reason.
Yes, that is just so exquisite and wonderful how you framed that in such a simple way. And the questions that you ask: what do you care about? What bothers you? And what can you do?
That's different. Bothers you takes you downhill, and trying to stop the downhill.
Okay,
Care about means developing care for.
I misspoke. My intention was, and thank you, my intention was to edify that point about what you care about, because as you care about it, you're going to want to nurture it
or develop it.
And in my that's kind of synonymous in my mind.
They're opposites in mine.
Oh, interesting.
I know. We could go on for days. We have all sorts of language come out of the humanist school that means I do something to make it better. And let's try and stop every one of those when people put them in, because it means we're not understanding the system and what it needs, and coming to give capability to it to do its own work.
So one of the things that this brings up for me is the whole nature of caring.
Yeah.
And the care and concern, whether that's part of what you're talking about. To me, when you care for something, that concern is there. You want to understand it, support it, be part of it, and do something positive with it. I think that's the point that you're making.
No, it's not, but
I'm so working on trying to understand.
Well, you don't have my framework right in your head. There's kindness.
True. And trying to understand it without that background is a little challenging.
Right. And no one can have. It's not even possible. So the biggest thing you can do is not to try and reframe in your words what I just said, because the odds are good. It's not going to fit. Like, there is kindness, empathy, compassion, and caring. And caring only means I develop your capability, period. I don't support you. I don't try to figure out how to nurture you. All that becomes compassion or empathy. And
Okay.
so anyway, I gotta go, Zen. I'm getting really short of breath. So
Well, Carol, I totally appreciate your time and am so honored that you took the time to share with me and have the wonderful conversation in
I
such a
know
way that we did. Oh, but it's still, here we are, you know, we had fun with it. It was like, even though there
exactly.
was some kerfuffles, that we still, you know, kind of intended to be on the same page and feel that
Oh yeah,
that care and compassion for one another.
yeah. I agree. I've loved every word of it and every moment.
Thank you so much, Carol. I dearly appreciate you and wish you the best in the coming transition.
Yeah,
And
it
your
will
evolution.
probably happen by mid-year next year or this year. So I wish you the best and you continue to be in a body.
And
And
now I have some of you for posterity.
yeah,
That is so
yeah.
wonderful. And thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
And namaste and in la catch. And thank you for watching this episode of One World in a New World and our wonderful conversation that I hope you understood. And we'll see you next time.